moment. It's good.
Great. So it is November 6th, 6:08 p.m. and I call this meeting of the Equity Board to order. And I think, Dale, can I have your assistance with roll call?
Absolutely. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 excused absences this evening, which means we'll do a quick roll call of the folks that are in attendance, starting with Ray Manahan.
Here.
Varnika Doka.
Here.
Preeti Modipan.
Here.
Leslie Millender-Irwin.
Here.
And Kelly Munn.
Yeah.
Will be serving as a full voting member this evening.
Great. So then next up on the agenda is public comments. And I believe we have Ted Lucas.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Up to give public comments.
Can I join you for a second?
Yeah,
So it's great to see you. And well, and hi, everybody out there. This is our next, and you guys have been big supporters and frequent attenders at the next community building social. So we've sent the invitation to Dale electronically. So you have it there, but you'll love our colorful invitations here. Ian, please, and I'll leave a few extras. And we're in some way or another inviting the mayor and the mayor's office as well, and all of you as equity board members to a very, very interesting special edition of the next community building social, because the guest speakers are 3 members of the Issaquah City Council. Chris Ray, Victoria Hunt, and Tola Martz. Yeah, so that's amazing and interesting and exciting. And through Barbara De Michelle, who attended a couple of them already of the community, so it was her idea, and she initiated, on her part, a request, or would it be fine for city council members to attend one and share what the city council is doing to build community, build society, making Issaquah a welcoming community, whatever they want to say, in a sense, right? That can't be more than 3, so we're talking about 3 in there. And I think there'll be plenty of room for questions and answers, and that's what everybody wants, that kind of community engagement, conversation about community building from our city council members. So that's just fantastic, over the moon. So please attend if any of you can, and of course you can bring family members and friends, people of all ages, and it's, the program is about an hour, including question and answer, and then it's food, dinner, and social talking and getting to know each other. At this address, plenty of parking. It's on Lake Savannah, it's just right here close by in Issaquah. And we've had and held it there many times before. So actually Barbara and Michelle was there at that stuff. So Ray and others out there, please. I think this will be a really good one. Join us. That's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Love you guys.
And I don't believe there's any other public comments.
And we did not receive any virtual public comment ahead of tonight's meeting either.
Okay, so then we'll move on to approval of minutes. I'll give folks maybe a couple of minutes to quickly scan the minutes in the board packet, and then when ready, I'll request or someone may make a motion to approve. Let's just give it 2 minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Yes.
Okay.
And a third.
All right, let's see, now we have some time for discussion. Any corrections or amendments would anyone like to make? Okay, so I think with that, we have approved our 2 sets of meeting minutes for September 4th and then for our joint meeting on October 16th.
Great.
All right. So now we are on to the chair report. And so I guess we'll start with our opening question. And I guess, I was thinking about the question earlier today because I know this might be a hard day for some folks, given it's the day after the election. And so I really appreciate all of you who are able to be present today and make sure we have this quorum. So thank you all. So I was in a meeting earlier today and a colleague suggested this as an icebreaker question, and it really did lift my mood. And so I was going to suggest we use it here. And that question is, what is something that's happened in the last few days that has brought a smile to your face? And if nothing is coming up for you, you can feel free to pass it to the next person. So who would like to go first?
I'll go first. A friend of mine texted me another woman and said, I need fellowship today. Let's go do something. And that just lifted my spirits. Very good. And so we had a nice day looking at Christmas stuff, which is not something I normally do because it was just pretty, right? It was just pretty and fun. And that she thought that we might all need it.
I can go next. I was struggling for an answer earlier today, but I did reflect on. So last week, our cat had her birthday. She's going to turn 5, and my son picked up this little catnip toy for her, and she got so high on catnip. I had this picture of her with her eyes like all dilated, and so it just made me crack up. That brought a smile to my face.
Oh, goodness.
All right, you ready to go?
Yeah, I'd love to. We have some very close friends in the Seattle area, and we were at a party to honor one of her former classmates who became an Eagle Scout, and it was a wonderful event. They had lots of friends and people who commended her, and while she was up there, she shared the relationship that she has with my daughter because they went to school for several years. So that was just really, really inspirational on the effort that she took to get to that level. So it was really a wonderful event. So I wanted to share that with you.
Thanks, Ray. It's wonderful. Hey, Leslie.
Gosh, it has been a tough day, so I really had to dig for this one. I would say a couple of days ago, we took our son to dinner just at Olive Garden, and we had heard some teenage slang, and we decided to torture him with the fact that we, his uncool parents, knew skibbity toilet. So we just said it to him 900 times out of context, and I swear if someone could just fold up into a cringe ball, it would have been him. I was like, we know the secrets of teenagers. So it was fun just letting him know we know. So maybe.
Okay, and speaking of teenagers, I don't know if Varnica is able to go off mute and answer.
Yeah, mine's definitely not as exciting, but I guess I just finished my coding assignment after like 10 hours, so definitely much more happier right now.
Heck yeah.
Fantastic. Maybe let's jump back to Dale.
Yeah, and it looks like Shay has joined us. This is not AI note taker Shay up here at this point. Shay, can you hear us?
I can. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Preeti, we're just doing our opening question, and so we're just all answering that. Which
Awesome.
maybe you
And I'm sorry, could you repeat it for me?
Yeah, so given that today might be tough for folks, just wanted you to reflect on something that might have happened in the last few days that brought a smile to your face.
Well, I would say that my co-pilot has been super encouraging just about everything, and it's helped me kind of just look at the brighter side of things. Like, things didn't necessarily go the way I wanted, but on the brighter side of things, everybody survived and we all made it through, and it's all finally over, and we can all relax and take a deep breath and think about all the things that are most precious to us.
Thanks, Shay.
Which on that note, I also had to do a little digging and kind of look at my calendar and remember what I've done in the last few days. We had pizza with a good family friend, and he's 3 now, their son who's 3, who's like just a joy, and the relationship that their son has with our dog is like one of the most special relationships I've ever seen. Like they just clearly get so much joy from each other. And so it was just really nice for them to just be wild and around together, the 2 of them. So that's something that brought me a smile a couple days ago.
Okay, well, thank you all. I think we covered everyone, and Ted was going to pass. So, okay, so Dale, staff report.
Yeah, absolutely. So this will be a quick one. I have the gamut tonight of agenda items, so I'll keep the staff report update from previous meetings rather short. The most notable thing to share, so at our September 4 meeting, the finance team, well, it was a combo, I guess. Andrea Schneider, our deputy city administrator, and Jillian Straub, our management analyst, came to talk to the equity board about the inclusion of an equity impact assessment in the budget. As you may be aware of, or maybe I'm sharing some new news for you. The city is in a really challenging budget moment. Not only are we facing a significant shortfall of revenue for this current year, but over the course of the upcoming biennium, a projected gap of likely about between $8 and $11 million. For a city our size, that is a lot of money. And so the city over the course of the last few months has gone through a really challenging process of reducing our current year expenditures, but also our expected future year expenditures for the upcoming biennium. You can see there's a great the mayor has a great podcast. It's a podcast, but it's also a YouTube video, a video cast discussing the challenges of this current budget on the city's website. I'd highly recommend taking a listen to it. She'll explain more in depth of sort of why we are where we are and what the administration is doing to get us into a fiscally okay spot. That said, one of the items in her budget, in her proposed budget that went to council just a couple of weeks ago, a week ago, is a equity impact assessment. It's $50,000 for an equity impact assessment, which is a smaller amount of money than we had originally hoped to have in the budget for an equity impact assessment. But I think I just wanted to share with this group that despite the fact that there were many other things that did not make it into this budget, and really painfully and sadly, there were many positions at the city that had been reduced as a part of this budget process. I do think it is still encouraging and something for this board to celebrate your advising that this is something that made it into the budget. It's currently, the budget is under consideration by the city council. Deliberations will be going on over the next few weeks. The next budget deliberation is on the 12th. That sounds right. That sounds like next Tuesday. Mm-hmm. The 12th will be the next city council budget deliberation. And so I would encourage equity board members to listen in. If you would like to submit public comment ahead of that, please do. But I will say from the first conversation, the council seemed very receptive to the inclusion of that equity impact assessment in the upcoming biennial budget. So I think a kudos to this group. You know, you've made your voices heard, especially over the summer months, and advocated for the inclusion of this in the budget. And it currently not only made it into the mayor's budget, but seems in strong consideration to make it through the budget process. Questions?
No question statement. It's a very powerful statement of priorities.
It
to
is.
Put that item in this, particularly this time.
It is.
And we should be very proud about what we did in the cities trying to do.
And Ray has his hand up.
Ray, you are on mute.
Kelly stole my words. So thank you for, and Dale, you were a catalyst in all of this. So I'm sure you helped package this and deliver the message appropriately and how vital this is. I mean, I'm so curious about what the verbiage is behind here. It's such a great opportunity for us to learn, especially in these times. and what we as equity board members can do once that is formalized. And you know me, I'm all about action. So I
Yeah.
think this is one of these things that'll help us take action instead of, I think we've had lots of opportunity here the past 3 years that I've been here to learn. So how do we translate that into action? I'm looking to this report to see what that allows us to do. So, thank you.
Absolutely. And as an addendum to my report, you know, the board will be involved in the scoping of what we'll use this money for. It also seems quite likely that we'll get a grad school consulting group from the University of Washington Evans School of Public Policy to support in some way. And so there will be more details about their participation as well. And I imagine they'll also come to this board multiple times throughout their time working on this project. So we'll have more news hopefully in January, which our January meeting is going to have to get moved because it's January 1st, but hopefully in January we'll have more news.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so Dale, you're up again with the cultural and religious calendar review.
I am. So as folks who've been on this board for a full cycle might be familiar with, you were an instrumental part of the process of the city developing and adopting the cultural and religious calendar that the city now uses to denote days of cultural and religious significance holistically for the community, but also days on which the city does not hold evening meetings. I think a great example, we actually we moved our October meeting to be a joint meeting, but our October meeting fell on a Jewish high holiday. And so we would have rescheduled that meeting, given that it falls on the short list of cultural and religious holidays. Provided that list ahead of time, the list has not changed. So when we went through the adoption process as a group, the recommendation was for it to be formally reviewed by this group every, I believe, 3 years. But it was asked that the list comes to the board every year just for a review, refresher, and for general consideration of if you happen to know that any of these dates are not correct. This is research that is done by our clerk's office, as they are the keepers of the calendar here at the city. And so just wanted to give the opportunity for a quick review or any questions from the board on the calendar. And it is totally fine if we don't have any. This is really just meant to be an informational update.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
There's some items in blue and some are just in black font.
I believe the blue are the federal holidays, but no, the black are the federal holidays.
Just curious about the color coding there.
Yep. There was an ask from, I actually believe, this board to make sure that they were all included in one list together. And that was a change we made from the first year, the pilot year of the calendar, to this year. And so now the clerks keep that list all together and denote the difference in color. And then that list will be uploaded to the website. Good question.
I could keep going. From what you know, so I know these were days when, meetings, public meetings and other meetings were not to be scheduled. Has that been presenting a hardship?
It really had. It has mostly been a challenge, honestly, for boards and commissions, because our city council and our council committees take initial precedence over meeting dates. And so when they have to move, the downstream impact of that is then boards and commissions sometimes need to reschedule, not always. Tonight is the perfect example. There's actually a council committee that had to be rescheduled from last night. It's happening tonight. But I think what the clerk's office often does when they look, there are some very close together holidays in the fall that sometimes provide a real challenge. We've been very lucky that as of yet, we've not had too much trouble. There's been a lot of rescheduling, but now that we know the dates so far in advance, it's been a lot. The administrative burden has decreased over time. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
No.
I mean, I don't have any dates or other things that I would want to amend.
Super. Okay. On to the next topic. I'm going to share my screen here because we do actually have a presentation for this one. Bye, Ted. Let me go ahead and I will put this in. Awesome. Okay. I'm back, but as a solo presenter this time. Juliana was unable to join me this evening. She sends her just gratitude for this group, continuing to be a helpful partner as we develop this tool for the city. You'll notice on your agenda that this item is marked with an A. That means action. So we will actually be voting on this item tonight. The recommendation from the administration is to vote to recommend that the city do adopt this glossary, this 1.0 version of this glossary. As a reminder to this group, you can recommend small changes tonight if you see typos or you want to add like a couple words to a sentence. We can absolutely make those amendments live in this meeting and then vote in that way, similar to the letter. Significant changes, however, will require this to come back again to the board. And so with that, I'll share a little about the purpose tonight. So the purpose tonight is to share with you the development and the current final 1.0 version draft of the city's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging glossary. And it's to also obtain your approval to launch this first version of the glossary with city staff. The direction needed tonight is very specific. First, are there any deal breakers for this group? So deal breaker terms, words that have been left out of this that you just feel like in a 1.0 version, the city cannot move forward unless there's a term or a word that is in here. And is there anything that the city should consider, the administration should consider as we implement this first version of this glossary with staff? A little bit of background, a reminder for this group. So in 22 and 23, the city was getting a good amount of feedback from staff members, from board and commission members, from the public, that the language around some of the equity language that was showing up in city documents, in city presentations, was unclear. There wasn't a clear definition of what some of these words meant, specifically some of the words that already showed up in city documents. In 2023, the city staff conducted an internal analysis of staff knowledge of terms, of equity terms, and just anecdotal evidence gathering on the public's understanding of some of the common terms we use, like the word equity versus the word equality, and learned that this was indeed a need. There was a need to be clearer and to have shared understanding and shared language around some of these terms, especially again, I will emphasize again, especially the terms that already show up in city work. In the beginning of this year, staff on the city's internal equity team did a survey of city documents to try to get an understanding of what are all the terms that are already showing up. You know, we were hearing from staff, oh, this term or from some members of the public, this term shows up here and here and here, and it seems to be meaning something different in each place. Staff on that internal team also researched other organizations and other jurisdictions' similar tools. And then worked on developing initial draft glossary. In, I believe it was May, members of that team visited the equity board with a draft and shared that draft with this group and got some feedback on the content, specifically feedback on the inclusion of what terms in the first part of the glossary, the organization of the document, as well as whether or not to include a terms we should avoid section of the document. In Q3 and into the beginning of Q4, that internal team made revisions based on feedback from this group, as well as feedback from the internal equity team at large. That was then presented to the internal equity team for some additional feedback, and has been being started to be used in little pockets, little work group pockets around the city, but has not been formally rolled out in any sort of way, because we knew that we needed to return to the board for final approval on this 1.0 version of the document. So that is the history of where we've been. then here is where we are. So I want to share a little bit more about the drafting process and the progress that we made following engagement with the board. So first, as a reminder, the priority for this document is for city staff first and foremost. And so we focused on first and foremost words that are already being used in City of Issaquah documents, both internal documents and anything that's public facing. Then we thought, and this was great feedback from this group, was are there foundational terms that actually need to precede those documented terms to help people understand terms that might be showing up already? We did add the avoid terms to avoid section and incorporated much of the feedback, but not all of the feedback that was offered by the board in May. And I think it's important to note that definitions are sourced from other governmental agencies, nonprofit organizations, and academic institutions. No definition was developed by a City of Issaquah employee, and we felt that was really important, that we were pulling from trusted sources. Actually, almost, I would say we've listed all three, but I would say largely academic institutions in this work. The primary audience is still city staff. Our plan right now is to provide this as part of the orientation or QA 101 onboarding process for staff. We know, however, that's only getting new staff. And in a time when we are likely not hiring a lot of staff, there needs to be another plan. So this will also be available as a full document on the city's equity team SharePoint. And we'll also share the document publicly on the city website for community members, anyone external to the city to see. We do think that one of the biggest, and I think I have a slide, the next slide is about this. Our biggest plan is to design a lunch and learn session that we can offer to staff quarterly throughout the year, as well as to embed a term rollout in our Chronicle, which is our sort of internal city newsletter, the Chronicle, of course, which goes out bi-weekly, essentially. That's the approach we've taken to sharing the religious and cultural holidays, is that those at the top of the month of those holidays occur. We share about those holidays in that Chronicle. We'd like to do something similar with the rollout of this document, which is to use the Chronicle, which is something that all staff get, as a way to share about these terms over time. Making sure that the full document is available we're hoping for January to share the full document and make it available to all staff, but then to re-emphasize that with sort of a bi-weekly term rollout. Also, I think this was recommended at the May meeting. We would like this to come back to the equity board annually for a review and update. We really recognize as staff that this is a 1.0 version, and we'd really like to emphasize the goal is to not make perfect the enemy of the good, but to start the work. I think that we've been working on this all year, and there's some urgency at this point about starting to get something in front of folks so that we can actually start the education and engagement process. But having this actually come back for a formal review annually, so unlike the religious and cultural calendar, which is we just kind of looked at right now, we would actually probably a full meeting or agenda item in October of each year about this particular tool and anything that the equity board would like to recommend updating. Of course, ad hoc revisions and updates are going to be considered and processed through the internal equity team in the meantime. And that group will serve as the steward for this tool amongst staff. So timing and next steps, and then we'll open for questions and discussion. Following this meeting, if we were to approve this to move forward, would be to share this again with the city's senior leadership team. They've been apprised of this throughout the development process, but coming back to them formally with the recommendation from this board, and then bring the approved glossary to the internal equity team to finalize the plan for staff rollout in the first quarter of the coming year. In Q1, we would see that city staff launch, so the Chronicle with the full document, the Lunch and Learn series starting in January, and then the bi-weekly term sharing out in the Chronicle that goes out basically twice a month. And then the hope would be to return to the board in September or October of the coming year to report out on revisions, report out on impacts, and take any additional feedback and make modifications based on the board's feedback as well. So as a reminder, direction for tonight, are there any deal breaker terms or words that have been left out of this 1.0 version that you feel like the city cannot move forward with a 1.0 glossary without this term included? And is there anything that the administration or the internal equity team should further consider as it implements this first version with city staff? Ray? Yes, questions, I should say, questions.
Well, I have questions, comments, and a request. So where should I start?
Wherever makes sense.
Well, first of all, comments. I think you answered my first question, which was, is this the first version of this? Because I don't remember seeing it. So this is the first time we've laid eyes on a document like this. It sounds like, Dale, correct?
This is not. This is the second time. So there was a presentation of the draft of this document. It was in a slightly different form. You can see that it's changed a little bit in the flow of the document. There was also an element of like a key that we removed because it was becoming kind of disconnected from the purpose of the document. It was making it overly complicated. But this is actually the second time, Ray, that we've seen this.
Okay. That's good. That we've been giving this a lot of thought. So my comments were, one, I credit the author. First of all, these terms are constantly changing. So I don't know if it was you, Dale, or somebody else who was assigned to capture all of these. It's just hard to keep up. And for you, I think I'm on top of all of these terms, and I've opened this document and I realize I'm not. So it's such an opportunity to learn about something. So that's my comment. Credit the author. And then the terms to avoid, that was really, really informative. I mean, think about that section and the things that we can apply to our daily conversations. It's just an opportunity to be sensitive about those things. So again, thank you for educating us. You think we'd be on top of these things, but again, always opportunities to learn. The only request that I have was when I was going through these and the LGBTQI section, there's effort to, I'm trying to get to that page. I think it's page, what is that? 19 of 64. I'm looking at the items. So with those acronyms, transgender, and what is it? There's others that have been elaborated on. I mean, this is an acronym for 7 different things, right? So perhaps in that box, you can clarify exactly what those letters are, because there was an effort made to call out transgender and call out, I think one other one, intersex or something, but maybe just to avoid confusion or for an opportunity to further educate is, what do each of those letters stand for? And if the target audience is, like you were mentioning earlier, is just city employees, I totally get it if they understand what all these acronyms are. But I, for one, am going to use this as an opportunity to educate others. Like, I'm going to print this out and have a discussion. This is the kind of stuff that our equity board works on. Are you familiar with all these terms? And I think we're going to get a lot of interest from folks that are able to see something like this.
Absolutely. That would be a small revision that we could make.
Okay.
Shay, you had your hand up.
Yes, because I did have a question. And I think Ray touched on this a little bit, that the terms are ever changing and things are forever being updated. Is it possible that we could look at possibly revising a little sooner than a year, or reviewing a revision prior to a year? It seems like a year is a really long time before we're able to look at the terms again and see what changes have occurred.
Absolutely. If we wanted to move it to like mid-year, have it be a June meeting item, I think that would be totally reasonable, especially given the deliberate pace of government. It will likely take, if we talk about it in June, it will likely take until September or October to make sure it's updated, to then adopt it in September or October. So I think, Shay, that would be totally something that we could do. Move it into, middle of the year, and that gives us plenty of time.
Thank you. That's all I had.
If I could just build off of Shay's comment there. It feels like this should be a dynamic document, and I know you've alluded to the internal equity team maybe doing, making additions and updates throughout. And that could lead to like a version control nightmare. I know we have 1.0, but then it's like, what's 1.1, 1.2,
1.5, yeah.
When do you get to a 2.0? So just thinking about like the platform this is on. And so I know you have SharePoint, so I don't know if you have like MS lists as a possible platform. And then that way you can have a last updated field by term, and so it doesn't have to be associated with the entire document. That way it can be more living and dynamic.
I love that idea.
So I would, and searchable
Yep.
with that kind of format. So if it's something that's being launched, maybe think about like lists as a possibility there.
I think that sounds like a great way for us to keep that internally, that we have sort of the external thing that we make available on the website, but that over the course of the year, it could be iterative and updated. And that way, even in June, we could bring that, like, here's where it is now, based on just the iterative process internally with staff, and have the board weigh in on those updates. Oh, spider. Great.
And I'll just say out loud that I already emailed Dale a list of more terms, and for both sides, like terms to add and terms to avoid. And so just being mindful of the fact that this is ever changing. And so I didn't think none of those were deal breakers. So that's why I didn't bring it up here.
So it can go in the next version.
Yeah. Yeah. Or whenever. Yeah.
So I just have a process question, which is ultimately, how is this document, I guess, either forwarded or attached to internal city processes? So I'll use the example of a request for a proposal process.
Yep.
So is this document in some way attached to a policy that the city has, that any type of RFP that's either written or received back, that it has to either reflect the do not avoid language, or to make sure that the language within those documents are inclusive?
Yeah.
How does that work process-wise?
That's a great question. So I have an answer to that specific example, but I'm going to start with, I think, the original intent of how we hope this is used. And we hope it's first and foremost used by city staff in their drafting of documents.
Okay.
So the hope is that if we start with staff and we say, let's learn and understand these terms and either start using them, or in the case of the things to avoid, stop using them in what we put out into the world. And then actually, to switch gears for a second, very specifically on the RFP part, we do have very specific language in our RFP templates around city values that we expect vendors to meet around sustainability and social equity.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a different approach. I would say we're not yet at the point where we'd say attach this document as probably part of the expectations around sort of vendors quite yet, but that could be, I think, and especially as we think about what this equity impact assessment might recommend the city do.
For sure.
But first and foremost, this is really, I think, that in terms of processes, we're expecting city staff to learn these terms, understand them, and use them appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think related to that, so it sounds like you've got, so there's a tool that's been developed, and so you're coming up with like a plan to roll out the tool and support the learning to use the tool.
Yep.
So that's, good change management, approaches. And then I'm thinking about, so given our political climate and how it's changing, it seems right now this is set up to be more of a guidance document, like use this whenever you can.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I don't necessarily want to plan for the worst case scenario, but we know people react to something that feels like it's politically correct.
Absolutely.
And things like that. So What kind of path towards accountability might this be on? And especially for the folks who might be doing something out of more bad intentions, you know, versus folks who are just like not remembering, right?
Yep.
And so I'm just kind of wondering, yeah, I don't want to design for the worst, but
Yeah.
just kind of being mindful of that.
No, that's a great question. And I have to say, I don't have an answer to that question. I think that's a good question for our internal equity team as we think about, they're building out additional training broadly around DEI. And so I think a good question for them is, how do we want this tool to be, how do we want folks to be held accountable in a way that they are encouraged to use this? We ran into a similar challenge around our our sort of sustainable purchasing plan, where this is something we're asking folks to do. It's not something that we're requiring folks to do.
Yeah.
And so how can we do our best to support folks in this kind of tool also in using it? Yeah. I think if this group has recommendations around Prithi's question, I'd love to hear those as well.
Maybe before we jump to Ray, I just, so I know, where I work, there was a lot of effort around, like wellness, webinars and things like that were geared to different affinity groups. And so it was like strongly recommended for, like to go to the one that's associated with your affinity group. And some folks from other affinity groups didn't like that, and they didn't like the feeling that they were being excluded from being allowed in. And so they would, what's the word called, like Zoom bomb or whatever, those meetings, and create maybe a negative environment. And so I'm like, those scenarios really do happen. And so I guess that's where I just, want to be mindful. Like, so if someone is blatantly using the terms on the do not use list, what are the mechanisms there?
Yeah, and I think one thing that I know we've talked about, I read a great book recently, actually, about the difference between prejudice, bias, and bullying, and how to intervene in each of those situations, because it's actually a different way to intervene, because the motivation behind what the person is doing is different. And so I know that we our HR director and our equity team have also been thinking a lot about sort of what does an intervention look like, and how do we prepare people to also be to intervene appropriately in those moments, and sort of whether or not someone's intending to be intending to harm or not. Yeah,
That's great. Those tools will probably be relevant here.
absolutely. Ray. Oh, Ray, you're muted.
Is there any chance, and I know we upload our minutes and our notes into our website, but if this could be turned into a formal document that folks can just reference directly from the website, is that a possibility? I'm looking at the website right now, and there's like this section called View More for other meetings, legislative records. Is that a possibility, Dale?
We can just make it available on the equity board website.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be embedded within the minutes at all. We can have it be a separate document. Yeah.
Wonderful. Great.
I'm going to keep going with the question. When I'm thinking about the implementation or the deployment of the tool, with the different mechanisms you have, like the newsletter and lunch and learns, does that get to kind of the front lines of staff? Like, would you be able to reach everyone, or are you thinking about that, I guess?
Yeah, I think we're thinking, those things do go to everyone, and they do have pretty good readership. We got a lot of really positive staff feedback from all departments, all different roles around our religious and cultural calendar rollout. And we knew people were reading it, because when there were holidays that weren't included last time around, we heard about it. So that was a good indicator that people are rating the Quantico, and we can see it goes out via, I think, either a MailChimp or some aggregator. So we can actually see open rates, and click-through rates, which is really good data for us to have, and know whether it's getting to folks. I think that unsurprisingly, our hope is to get interested, to make sure it touches everyone, and then to double down on supporting the most interested folks as quickly as we can, which is, I think, what the Lunch and Learns will likely do. So a combination of sort of flood the space initially, and then be consistent with our rollout in the sort of biweekly Quantico rollout over the course of the year, but also to offer additional training. I think one thing the equity team has talked about a lot is that especially the terms to avoid, and how to intervene when someone uses one of those terms, that's like an actual training that we want to provide. So I think it'll be an option for everyone, and there is an expectation that everyone engages in a certain number of hours of DEI related development over the course of the year as part of their professional development plan, which all staff members have one of those. And so our hope is that by having that expectation, we'll hopefully drive some folks into some of these opportunities we'll be offering. But I think, again, it's a little bit of how do we bring people to the table or to the group versus, putting people mandatorily in a training that they don't want to be in, that they then push back against. So I think, we'll monitor that. And when we come with our update in June or earlier, bring some information on how that's going. Are we getting folks at those Lunch and Learns or not? Yes, Shay, I can absolutely share that book.
Yeah.
And I will get some copies of the Quantico. I'll make sure to take screenshots of those or to forward them to the equity board when they go out. Everything's public record, so there shouldn't be anything in there. It's usually stuff it'll be like something about, benefits and then important calendar dates, and then hopefully now, our DEIB Glossary term of the week.
So maybe another, so you mentioned MailChimp. Do all of city staff have email addresses?
They all have email addresses, and everyone has, if not a computer, a tablet. So all of our field staff have tablets. They use that in and out in their work, and they're expected to be both live on Teams and checking their email. So it goes to everybody, including our part-timers.
I had one other question. Trying to remember what it was. Oh, and I think you're already doing this, but we're in response to the second question, I was just like, the learnings from the cultural calendar. It sounds like you're applying them to this.
Yes.
Like, when you had resistors, what was the best way to bring them into the fold? And yeah, like I think you could probably anticipate the same type of questions, pushback, level of support, things like that.
Absolutely. And I think what I found encouraging, and I think what our equity team internally is hopeful about, is that even as we've done little bits of rolling this out, so we rolled this out originally to our senior leadership team and direct reports shortly after coming to the board in May. I believe it was at our July meeting, and shared just why we don't use stakeholders anymore. And the number of emails I got after that meeting to be like, could you share the exact slide with the rationale on it? Because I want to talk to my team, or I want to talk to this consultant we're working with who keeps using it. And in fact, we're going to meet with the Snoqualmie tribe next week, and it's all over their slide deck. And so it's already having, like, I think a lot of people, they want to know the words not to use, because no one really wants to create harm, which I think was like really encouraging. And we haven't heard a lot of like pushback that's like, oh, whatever, I'm going to still use that term. I'm sure we'll run into some of that. That's, I think, inevitable.
Yeah.
But I think so far, at least with the groups that we've rolled it out with, they've been really receptive. And I think if anything, just like grateful to know,
Yes.
which has been encouraging. But I do think, you know, I'm sure we'll, similar to the cultural religious calendar, I'm hopeful we'll hear about terms that we didn't include, that people are familiar with, that they would like to have us include. But we'll see. The equity team will be ready to field those, I think.
I hope you get a lot of feedback because that means they read it.
Yes, agreed.
It's very exciting, actually. I would have loved to have this when I was doing my job.
Yeah.
And was enmeshed in this work, and yet we did not have standard vocabulary, and we didn't think of it nor had the time to pull it together, right? So I will be like Ray sharing. I can think of 3 people right now who would jump on the opportunity to have something that somebody else put together. Right?
I've already shared it.
Any other questions, comments? The one modification to the actual document that's been recommended was Ray recommending clarifying all of the letters stand for in LGBTQIA. I think that is a minor revision that we can, if the group feels that is a good minor revision, we can accept that one and take a vote on whether or not the city should move forward with the document as is, or with that minor revision, I should say. Okay, we'll take a vote.
So just to clarify, so we have 6 members. And how many votes?
Everyone votes.
Everyone votes.
Yep. Kelly is a full voting member this evening, as we have many regular members missing. Yep.
Okay. And I don't remember how to do that.
You can just call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. All abstentions, raise their hand. And then that's all you need.
Okay. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so just to confirm, any no votes? And any abstentions?
The ayes have it. Excellent. So as a next step, this will move forward with those revisions recommended by Ray to the equity team for a planned rollout. And we will take into account this really robust and excellent feedback on sort of the rollout process and how to ensure and we'll come back in June at the latest. My next work item is putting together a draft of our work plan for the upcoming year. So June at the latest with the at that point most up-to-date version of the tool, as well as information about staff engagement, uptake, and use. Great.
Thank you, Dale. And I think we're all very proud, I think, of this tool and excited for its use.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
it's just a great tool and document.
A lot of work.
Amazing. Well, thanks for those emoji claps. It always feels better when it's an emoji clap, I gotta say.
All right, and Dale, you're back.
I'm here. I haven't left, but I'm back. So our last main agenda item for this evening was a last minute ad, which is on the school zone speed cameras, specifically on the equity impact assessment. The very drafty, I'm hoping you found at least a dozen typos in here, equity impact assessment on what the city is currently considering around the addition of 2 new school zone safety locations. This evening, we're just engaged in discussion. There's no action or vote needed, but I will share the purpose is to get your feedback and your input on the draft equity impact assessments related to the consideration of these 2 new school zone speed camera locations at Issaquah Valley Elementary and Grand Ridge Elementary School. Direction needed. So given the limited data available, and I will share I actually have some updated data from our police department that I just got at 5:15 this evening. So it is not reflected in your documents, but I can share a little bit about an ask I had of the department. Should further consideration of safety along both corridors be considered rather than just the 2 blocks next to the school? So part of the review was around safety concerns, and IPD shared traffic citations directly next to both schools with literally, I think it's like the 700 and 900 block on Newport Way, just that, rather than the whole, a longer strip of the road. Do you have any concerns about the findings in the draft equity impact assessment? And are there any other equity considerations that should be considered as part of this process? A little bit of background. I feel like I've become the subject matter expert actually on this topic in the last couple of months as I've been tasked with exploring this. So I know there wasn't a ton in the packet for today, but I would be more than happy to share anything that you want to go a little bit deeper on if you feel like you're lacking a little bit of context. This is the high level overview. In 2008, the city adopted its school zone speed camera policy and program. At the time, it was actually for any automated speed cameras, so it includes the city's ability to have red light cameras. But at the time, and then repeatedly in the intervening almost 20 years, the city has only maintained this one school zone location that potentially you're all very familiar with, along 2nd Avenue near Issaquah Middle and Issaquah High School. The big gap in this history, but I'll bring us up to 2022 and 2023. The city routinely gets concerns from residents about speeding near Issaquah Valley Elementary, Grand Ridge Elementary, and Cougar Mountain Middle School in Tallis. So regularly. We get them through See-Click-Fix. We get direct calls to the police. The police themselves also, despite having quite limited staff capacity in the last 5 years, I think we were finally almost at fully staffed. Also, as you saw in the impact assessment, are still catching people speeding in these areas, even though we have school zone flashing lights on during school hours. In Q1 of this year, 2024, the school district finalized a traffic speed study on Tallis Drive that was part of a requirement around the development of the middle school there, and found that speeds were not high enough to warrant a school zone speed camera on that particular stretch of road, especially since it's a divided highway or a divided road. It would only have been on the going down side that is adjacent to the middle school, and actually speeds were very slow going downhill. They were much faster going uphill on the opposite side. But the study found that speeds did not reach the threshold on average. In Q2 of 2024, I should say at this time, the city was already considering, do we expand school zone speed camera program? You know, we've had this one. It seems like speeding is still a concern in these other areas. The city was set to, or it is in the current capital improvement plan, is set to make traffic calming changes to Newport Way in particular, but those changes are not set to begin until at least 2032. So even though we know traffic calming is the goal and road redesign is the most effective way to change driving behavior, we're still, unfortunately, due to funding, we are a long way off. Although the funding from our current camera does fund traffic improvements, it does not produce enough revenue for those to have the money we need right now for those Newport Way traffic improvements. The police department visited city council to share about potential expanded red light camera and school zone camera programs in, I want to say, July. I'm not going to lie, it's sometime in Q2, so that couldn't have been July because that's Q3. I want to say it was May, and city council instructed the administration to pursue a vendor evaluation of 2 locations, Issaquah Valley Elementary and Grand Ridge Elementary. The vendor studies were completed for both red light cameras. Those were completed actually in early June. And then the city waited until school was back in session would make no sense to study driver behavior when the school zone lights are not flashing. In early September for the school zone safety locations. Staff completed an analysis of the financial feasibility based off some assumptions I'm happy to chat through, and drafted just this past week an equity impact analysis as is required by the new law adopted by state legislature this past spring. So that gives you
What law is that?
yes. ESSB, I cannot remember the number. It's a good question for me. But it was just adopted. It did two things. Well, it did three things. It expanded cities' ability to use automated traffic cameras for more purposes than they had been previously allowed to do. With that came a few requirements. One around how the revenue could be used. We actually already use our revenue in a particular way. So the revenue pays for the machinery itself, so our contract with the vendor that runs the camera, the administrative cost to process the violations. So we have both police department and municipal court staff whose time is spent processing violations and then also dealing with people coming in and paying for these violations. All additional revenue goes to transportation related projects. So road improvements, traffic calming, that's already how we had designated that our revenues be used. The new state law concretizes that is the only other thing that the revenue can be used for. And it specifically says must be used in the areas where those cameras are. So it really kind of narrows where that can be used. Because we already have a school zone safety camera program, given the fact that we only have one, we are allowed to have the addition of one other camera under the stipulations of our original program. A third camera would be under the stipulations of the new state law, which would also require, this is getting, can you tell that I read this whole law? Which would also require that starting in year 4 of the camera, that 20% of the revenue after administrative costs be put into a state fund that does not come back to the city. So it's a broader state fund. So it significantly decreases the financial viability of a third location. Doesn't make it out of the question. We would still bring in enough revenue to cover administrative costs and maybe a little bit of transportation project work, but significantly decreases the revenue that we would expect to bring in to cover the cost of the program. I'm trying to think if there's any other notable. I don't think so. I think, and what brings us all together today, required in the state law, is an equity impact assessment of any potential location for any camera. And so, yeah, which is great. We're into that. We like that that's part of the law now, which brings us to where we are. So why school zone speed cameras? Safety in school zones. As you know, driving around our city, all of our school zones already have rectangular rapid flashing beacons, those fun kind of 7-foot high flashing beacons letting you know you're entering a school zone. Many people think that those are accompanied by cameras. They are not, actually, with the exception of the ones on 2nd Avenue Southeast. And we are still seeing, because people realize after the first or second time they speed through that they're not getting caught and ticketed, we are still seeing pretty high rates of speeding, which was perceived and shared with us through resident and community member comment, and then also validated by the vendor studies that went out and looked to see, are people speeding in school zones? And you can see in your packet in the equity impact assessment, we shared just a little clip of what the vendor found, which was that yes, people are still speeding. They are speeding more when the lights are not flashing in most cases, not all cases, but most cases. But they are still speeding during school hours. About, between 11 and 19% of drivers going through the school zone during school hours when the beacons are flashing are still speeding. And then also why speed cameras, challenges with in-person enforcement. The next question that always comes up is, well, can't you just have a police officer there? As I've shared, our police department and as the police department has shared, has struggled with staffing, specifically staffing for sort of traffic sit and patrol. And we know that any officer that is sitting at a school zone waiting to pull people over is not in a position to respond to emergent needs. Also, the safety and effectiveness of road pursuits has been well studied. It is not safe. It is not safe for the police officer. It is not safe for the person they are pursuing. And on busy streets near where kids are coming and going, adding more speeding does not, it doesn't feel like a good solution. What's being considered? So as mentioned, we're considering 1 to 2 new school zone speed camera locations. The administration has recommended only 1 location at Newport Way Northwest. We think this is the most financially reasonable, and it is where we're continuing to see really consistent speeding that we don't think can be impacted by police like point enforcement. And that has to do with the way these 2 roadways are very different roadways. Northeast Park Drive, where Grand Ridge Elementary is located, is a road that it doesn't technically end at the end of the road around the circle, but it is an interior road that we would believe through some enforcement would pretty rapidly reduce, some police officer enforcement would pretty rapidly reduce behaviors. We also noticed that the most dangerous speeding behaviors in that area are happening outside of school zone hours. While Newport Way seems to have pretty consistent speeding with a little tick up in the afternoon, but pretty consistent, Grand Ridge sees a really big increase in dangerous behavior in the around 6 o'clock hour, which is not a time that we would have those cameras on in the first place. The council committee that has initially considered this, they were split in a 2-to-1 vote. 2 council members agreed with the recommendation to just add a location at Newport Way Northwest at Issaquah Valley Elementary. 1 recommended a school zone camera in both locations. It will go to the full council in a couple of weeks, but we wanted to complete an equity impact assessment on both locations ahead of that meeting. So I have a wealth of knowledge about this topic, one that I never thought I would know anything about, besides getting my own ticket from the Bailey Gasser Elementary School in Seattle, Washington school zone, of which I have clearly recklessly driven past. So I have to take accountability for that. November 25th, the city council will consider the addition of school zone cameras. If they were to approve 1 or 2, outreach to schools, additional outreach to schools, neighborhoods would happen in December to make sure that we have plenty of time to amend the contract with the vendor, to hire part-time staff, to support any sort of processing of violations. Q1 of 2025, so January, February, would involve installation of cameras, but also the trial period that's mentioned in the equity impact assessment. We wouldn't immediately start ticketing people. When the city originally launched its program, no first-time offenders, you get sort of a warning notice that said, hey, you were caught speeding going through here, don't do it again. So there would be a trial period. And then in Q2, new cameras would become active and violations would start being mailed. And so that's just that you have a general overview of the sort of process that we find ourselves within. The direction for tonight is really about the equity impact assessment. Should further consideration for safety along both corridors be considered rather than just the 2 blocks directly next to the school? Do you have any concerns about the findings in the draft equity impact assessment? And are there any other equity considerations that should be considered as part of this process? This is an initial draft. It's based on equity impact assessments that other cities have done around their additional cameras, but it certainly, there could be more in here. There could be less. I will share, I'm excited for the questions. I will share limited data. Is it a real issue? There's limited data in a lot of places on, I think one thing we've talked about before is, do we have the data, the racial demographics of people that are getting pulled over and ticketed? Mm-hmm. And the police department came to you and shared, no, we don't. Our officers don't make assumptions about the race that people are when we pull them over. It's not part of that. That's not part of the process. which changed dramatically based on legislation that came out in 2020. So you see a real difference in the data going from having race data to having a lot of unknowns. And we've not seen that change. So we don't have that data. We do have data on, I believe, ultimately when people pay citations, I think we may have data on that, but I was not able to get that data at this point. So you have what I have, and I'm excited to hear all of your thoughts. Let's go. Ray, lead us off.
Wow. So much to absorb here, and I commend you for your research. I have no objections to it. I was just curious. I was educated on, and I know you're not sharing this on your screen, but on page 63, it has the equity impact analysis score, and it looks like there's 22 categories, and everything was marked as a green check mark, except this is for the Newport Way location, except for demographics. And I was curious why, because there was a demographic report done under that. Did you see that, Dale, where it says triangle and an exclamation point? Is that assuming that it's not complete?
No, it's a concern about what we found. So both locations, there are some concerns based on the demographics of the residents in both neighborhoods that there could be some unintended impact on particular groups. So Newport Way Northwest, the neighborhood surrounding the school there, significantly older population than the city as a whole, though also significantly whiter population than the city as a whole, significantly almost entirely homeowners, but also as they are elderly, many I would imagine on fixed income. So you see a slightly lower median income. And so the warning there is around, we know that by putting a camera in a neighborhood, people that live in that neighborhood encounter that camera more frequently than people that do not. And so there's just a concern potentially of that group being disproportionately impacted by a camera there.
I see.
There's also a thing around the demographics for a camera up in Grand Ridge, which is a much more racially diverse neighborhood here, though a higher median income. And also, I would say, has the potential to have a really, really positive impact, as you also see a much higher proportion of households with children. And so you would imagine with school-age children walking to that school. So I think it's an exclamation point to say, hey, take a second look at this and know that if you say yes on this, there is the potential for this to have a disproportionate effect on a group that we would be concerned about.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So, related question for me. So when I was looking at the demographics around Newport, IB, and the one in Grand Ridge, so from my kids' experience with schools, they were bused across town, quite far away from where we live, to go to school.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think, maybe a missing data point for us to think about is what is the number of school kids who do walk to school, who walk to IB and who walk to Grand Ridge. So what is the pedestrian traffic, especially, during school hours, school kids in particular. But then I also know around the Grand Ridge area, the Highlands, is designed to be a walkable community. So pedestrian traffic
is high.
It's high regardless of the time.
Yep.
So I think, even though this might be more focused on school safety, I think if it's broadened out to pedestrian safety, there might be another rationale for having it up at Grand Ridge.
Yep.
Because, I drive by IBE all the time, and I don't see many kids on Newport Way. And during the beacon flashing time, so it just makes me wonder, how many pedestrians are we trying to keep safer there versus Grand Ridge?
Yep.
So that raised a question for me.
It's a great question.
And then, I think you can get the bus versus, walking.
Yep.
Demographics probably from the school district. And then related to the 2 block question. It seems probably more of an issue around Newport is if there were cameras there, is there a logical diversion path that cars would take?
Yeah.
And then are we passing the speeding problem on to another couple of blocks that could be where school kids walk?
Yeah.
Anyways, so if that is the next logical place for cars to be, I think then it's worthwhile to do a little bit more investigation about pedestrian traffic flow.
Yeah, and we have done some, so Newport is unsurprisingly like been an issue. And we get a good number of calls about specifically during before school and after school, the congestion, reckless driving, and also just they just installed that crossing light because you can't get out of there if you're on foot and you're going that way. We don't expect, based on the models, we don't expect there to be a diversion off of Newport Way because actually Newport Way is the diversion. People are cutting through on Newport Way because they are avoiding downtown or they are avoiding the state route, the next route over. And so actually that's where we're getting most of our reckless driving is non-residents trying to not end up in the congestion of Sunset Way and Front and that other, the road is escaping my, but likely we wouldn't see because there is no cut over street between those two. You would have, there's nothing that goes straight through, no other street that goes straight through. As someone that drives to Tibbetts Valley Manor from City Hall fairly often.
Yeah, I was thinking about like the cut over into maybe the school administration area and then cutting back onto Newport Way or, something like that, which would be making cars go more into the residential.
Yes. Maybe.
You would cut down through Gilman Village.
Yeah.
Oh, probably not that far. I was thinking of like diverting like a couple of blocks in.
Because Juniper does not connect
Juniper.
really.
Right.
Yeah.
Juniper
Okay.
just goes all the way over.
Mhm.
There's not a good there's not a good through street.
Okay.
We did look at this because it was something we were concerned about. Given that it is already being used as a pass-through street, would people find a new pass-through street?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I will say we are hopeful. We're required. There's a 5-year lease term for a camera. A required 5-year lease term. We do hope this would be a temporary. We'd have this for the next 5 years until we're ready to actually put the roundabout in. There are 2 roundabouts that are scheduled to go in that would actually hopefully mitigate some of the speeding that we're seeing.
What does the community think?
We haven't talked to the schools yet. I think that's the next group that we need to go to. We get a lot of community input. We get a lot of calls and we get a lot of see-click-fix neighborhood traffic concerns specifically around these 2 areas. And so it's high enough that we'd want to do something. We want to intervene in some way. The city has not done like a door-to-door, any sort of survey specifically about this, given that it already has these locations flashing with school zone camera or school zone lights. The expectation that people don't exceed the speed limit there by 6 miles over the speed limit feels within the administration feels like within its purview.
And how much do you get complaints about just having the light on Second?
Oh, I mean, they complain. There's complaints, but I would say not. It has no bearing on folks's driving record, and so generally people, I think they probably complain to the court when I have taken personal phone calls from residents who are eager to get out of their ticket. I don't know why they think the assistant to the city administrator has any impact on that. I think at the end of the day, every conversation I've had where I've also admitted getting nabbed by one of these cameras is sort of like, yeah, we probably shouldn't be going that fast in a school zone. So I think it's one of those things where, you know, no one likes getting a ticket. No one likes getting a ticket. But there is, I think, also a little bit of understanding of like we should be.
And how much is the ticket?
So the tickets for the city of Issaquah, they are $124. They are lower than I think almost every other jurisdictions. There has been questions of whether we should charge more. I think the city feels like that is enough of a financial burden without overly burdening people. And one thing that did come up in the equity impact assessment was studying the state actually mandates that we make that we cut our ticket costs in half by 50% by anyone that's on a state program.
Okay.
So so you can demonstrate that you are on some sort of program, assistance program, and get that ticket amount reduced.
Okay.
I also think one thing that came up as part of this assessment and in conversation with the police department is an alternative. So as they are building back up their traffic division, I know the chief is very interested in offering traffic school or some sort of alternative for folks, especially for like young kids who maybe are the one driving and their parent gets the ticket, and the ability for the parent to say, I wasn't driving, I would like my kid to attend this like 90-minute don't speed in school zones program. So given that it doesn't end up on one's driving record, we're still looking for other ways to make sure that there can be alternatives to paying. And that's one of the recommendations in the equity impact assessment is that the police department moves forward with the creation of that.
That's great.
Ray, I see your hand up. I also maybe saw Shay's hand up.
Yes, you did, but my question got answered about the cost of the tickets and the sliding fees. All of that was actually answered.
Awesome. Yeah, most jurisdictions, their base ticket is much higher, and they actually have like an even increased amount over a certain speed threshold. I think some cities, if you're above like 31 or 32 miles per hour, all of a sudden the ticket can be up to $290. We don't feel like that. The point of this is not to make money. The point of this is to change behavior without burdening people, to also make sure that it's financially, it is something the city can cover the costs of. And that would be nice to have additional revenue to go towards actual street improvements. We've seen a real slowdown in our capital projects for street improvements, for concrete, which is our concrete plan is our sidewalk program. What does Newport Way Northwest need? A sidewalk. And our ability to fund those programs, we would love to be able to have dollars to do that, because we know that ultimately is the thing that changes driving behavior. Ray, go ahead.
Again, just a question, opportunity to educate myself on the table that lists the demographic characteristics. So I'm looking at page 59 with the table that you've all put together. So let's just start with the very first one, Newport Way neighborhood tract, and it says race and ethnicity. Mm-hmm. And it captures white, alone residents, BIPOC residents, Hispanic residents. Those three numbers don't total 100%. So what happened to the other ethnicities in this area? And two, why is this exceeding 100%? How did they decide to pick on those three ethnicities?
The first two should add to 100%, white, alone, or BIPOC. And the way that Hispanic is gathered in the census or the American Community Survey is not as a race, but is as an ethnicity. It's actually the only ethnicity that's gathered in the census. It's a fascinating and also fascinating history on how that came to be. But so they should all exceed 100%, but the first two should total to 100%. Ray, the shortest answer is space and succinctness. I have it broken down by all the racial groups offered by the American Community Survey. It would be a really big table, and so just for the purpose of something short. But if the group recommends the full table or recommends more of a breakdown there, we can absolutely offer that to the city council.
Oh no, it was just a curiosity because I mean, if that's the largest demographics in that neighborhood that serve that utilize these streets, then that makes sense to put them on top. So I was just wondering what where you came across those numbers. So thank you.
The one question that I had for you is, it looked like my favorite traffic camera up by the high school and middle school. That's been running for 15 years now or so. What have we learned about the impact from that on speeding and ticketing, revenue, disproportionality or inequity, blah, blah, blah?
Absolutely. So what we learned is maybe not so surprising that the cameras have a really good impact they have a really quick impact. So in the first like couple of years, if you have the same drivers driving on the same street, they work very effectively, very quickly, to the point where they oftentimes put themselves out of business pretty quickly as well, which is what we would actually expect to have happen up in the Highlands, is that we actually would expect that the revenues would not cover the expenditures after basically year 3. Because it's an internal street, you're not getting any pass-through traffic.
Right.
That's what's a little different about Second Avenue and is different about Newport Way, is that you have a good amount of ongoing pass-through traffic. So folks that are cutting over those streets to avoid congestion on other streets, and so you get new drivers. What we saw in the data is that from the implementation of the camera in 2008 to about 2012, like you see a pretty dramatic decrease. And then you see a leveling out. You see a stable state where about, I think actually the data today from, and I can look it up here in a second. I got the data today on sort of on average, how many violations during the school day. And I think it's like 200 maybe a day. And about 70 of those get paid. So we also not everyone pays, I think, which is also like an important thing to know. And that's based into our assumptions about these sites being financially viable, is about a pay rate of somewhere between 35 and 45%. But during school hours, we're still seeing about 200 speeders on Second Avenue. So you see this initial drop off, and then you see a leveling out. And I think that's why this isn't a long-term solution, really. We haven't had the ability, I think, to do the road redesign there that we'd like to see. And a lot of this has to do with limitations on revenues for capital projects and transportation. So that one has stayed there just because it's stayed there and there's not been a desire to rethink it at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, I mean, obviously it's a different neighborhood, so the demographics are different. But if that same type of exercise were done on Second, and certain groups were bubbling up as possibly being, more negatively impacted by it, and then seeing actually, were they? Or I don't know. If you kind of tested that out as a way to learn what would happen here, to be able to predict, that could be something.
And one thing that I've been thinking about, and what wasn't required under the original program, and so second we report out on number of violations and things like that. But I don't think they're in the same way that it's now required by law to do a pretty comprehensive program evaluation, which is what's recommended in this equity impact assessment. That camera isn't required to do that because was adopted so long ago. And so the hope would be, if we were to move forward, that would get brought in as well to any program evaluation moving forward, because we now have more than one camera in the program. But it's a great point. With my free time, I would actually love to look into that. If I could find myself a couple hours to just pull the data on that census tract, that would be it'd be probably actually pretty easy to do.
So I reviewed this information, and I had some initial concerns that were addressed just by one of my main concerns were police interactions with someone that would be caught under one of these traffic cameras.
Yeah.
Because I am a supporter of having less police interaction.
Yeah.
on traffic matters.
Yeah.
Because I think police resources should be used in different ways.
Yep.
So certainly the use of a traffic camera would certainly be, I think, more preferable.
Yeah.
So that was a concern that was allayed based on my review. And then obviously the demographics of the areas that was addressed to by that the graph or that chart that
Yep.
Ray pointed out. Because I was certainly concerned about the demographics of the area and specifically about the resident types. Are we
Yeah.
looking at areas that are predominantly apartments or
Yeah.
are they homes? Because that makes a
Yeah.
huge difference in terms of equity. So that's been addressed. And then, of course, what we've all talked about, the cost of tickets. The Irwins have contributed to.
We've all
the,
contributed.
Yes, so I told my husband he should get a plaque on second because of not leaving the house on time and getting someone to school. So no, I think that the report is very comprehensive and I think this would certainly be a viable idea. And I don't think you would have a huge impact to equity based on I think some of the recommendations that are made here in terms of traffic, school, signage, and other things that we can do to kind of offset some of the unintended consequences or impacts. So very comprehensive.
Should propose this idea of the donor plaque once you read. Get that in the, you get to put your initials in the new concrete.
Kind of a badge of honor to live in Issaquah.
Yeah.
At least once.
Something to add on to Leslie's comment related to the signage and communications. Just, I know this is a draft, but being mindful of putting that into multiple languages.
Yeah.
When the time comes.
Yep. Yeah, and we're thinking, I mean, if it moves forward, and it may not, but if it moves forward, I think I've already spoken with our communications team on also outreach. We need to first and foremost reach out to schools because something needs to go home with students. That is the first and foremost.
Yes.
So that we've already started that conversation just in case it does. But and I know they are thinking a lot about language accessibility as well. So also, I think it was mentioned in this report, if not worth mentioning, we also noticed through this process that currently the city doesn't share any information about our traffic, the one camera, why we have it, why traffic, none of that exists on the website. And so we want there to be an educational component to, why, I think Leslie, you just put it really well, but why this instead of traffic cops and things like that. And so we've talked a lot about building out a more building out a webpage to share more about this. If it were, even if it doesn't move forward, just even about our current location.
Yeah, because people think you're getting rich.
And we are not.
And you explained it really well.
Yeah.
So, and literally I was thinking that needs to get out there.
Yeah. On the public record, our school zone fund, so our all the fund from this goes into the school zone safety fund. It doesn't go into the general fund, it goes into the school zone safety fund that then pays out the administrative costs. So to the municipal court, to the police department as they do the processing, and to our vendor. And then additional funds that go out to capital projects as they're funded. That fund is set to be in the black net, or would be good if it's in the black right now. It's set to be in the red in 26 because we're not making money off of this. We're paying to administer the program, and we were very lucky a couple of years ago to have enough money in our in there to pay for some of the really nicely redone sidewalks that you've seen and the nicely repaved road and some of the rotary projects around town over the course of the last decade. But it is not a fund that is running big, and it doesn't pay into the general fund, which is important to emphasize.
Good story to tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess one thing that is sticking in my mind, and I'm pretty sure the data aren't available for it, is this is about safety.
Yeah.
And I know accidents avoided, injuries avoided,
Yeah.
like the avoidance of something
Yeah.
is really hard to measure. But if there is a way, you know, like fancy math statistics, you know, if you
Yeah.
get like a professional program evaluator in this to be able to kind of know like what lives being saved,
Yeah.
you know, things like that. Because I mean, I remember a few years ago when there was that child who was struck by a car further up on Newport Way.
Yeah.
That's just a tragedy.
Yeah, I'll certainly pose a question to our crime prevention analyst. I think, you know, as many of you have met her already, she's a wizard with numbers, and has an epidemiology background, so certainly deals in models. She's put some great data together for this for us, and it would be interesting to chat with her about the ability to do any sort of predictive, basically the opposite of predictive analytics. Yeah, because you see, I mean, all of what we have there reported is what's been reported, which is really hard to get near misses because oftentimes they're not being reported. And if they are, they're being reported as this person was driving recklessly. So we can use that, the reports as a little bit of a sort of proxy, but it's hard to know, you know, where we are currently and then what the impact would be. The hope is that we see we see the expected reduction in speed. So, yeah. Great. Uh-oh. I think we lost,
Veronica said she had to leave, but Shay.
I think we just lost quorum. So that might be, we might be adjourned. Which we could adjourn and then do our closing thought off the record. Oh no, Shay's back. Oh, thank goodness. Shay, you gave us a temporary heart attack. We're glad you're back.
Sorry, I kind of dropped by accident there, switching devices.
You're good. We're wrapping up momentarily. So, any last thoughts on this topic though before? Okay, great. Thank you. I have robust feedback from this group. Again, this will go to council along with the overarching presentation on the 25th of November. Please feel free to tune in. Please feel free to leave any sort of public comment you would like to make as a member of the community. Any notes you have between now and then, let me know. I'll probably finalize materials for this the end of next week. So anything between now and then would be super helpful.
Great. And so now we're on other businesses and announcements. I guess I would pause to see if anyone has other business or announcements.
I have a little thing, like two. One is we just had that joint meeting. And this may not be true for everybody else, but I experienced the fact that I was so interested in this subject that I forgot that I was doing equity perspective. And all I would need, this sounds so lame, but is something that says an equity perspective or an equity review when we do these joint, because I've noticed that I've done it before. I'll go through like the first 20 minutes and then I'll go, oh, I need to be thinking about this perspective, not because I'm interested in this subject. It's just, it would be helpful to me and not anybody else. So my second thing is I've forgotten her name, but she had sent an email to all of us about the lack of warmth and welcoming in our city public buildings. It's Connie
Yes.
Marsh. Yes. And I would like to follow up on it at some point.
Great. Noted. One of the groups that was supposed to come to us as part of the equity impact assessment was our admin services team talking about the facilities update. You know, there is this far off plan right now of what a new city hall in whatever shape and space it will be at some point would be like. That building over there really is not, it was built as a police station. It feels like a police station. Right now the mayor is forming a task force to think about facilities and a plan for facilities. So I would encourage everyone to know about that and ask about it. But I will see if admin services can come and talk to us about their facilities plans and how they're
Yeah.
thinking about that. We'll definitely put it on our work plan for 2025.
Great. Other announcements or topics? Okay, so maybe let's wrap up with our checkout question. We just had 3 really interesting topics that I think covered a pretty broad range of county or city operations. So just wanted to know how folks are feeling as we wind down the meeting. You know, what's a word or a sentence to check out with?
I can start us off. Probably the extrovert in me, but I'm feeling pretty invigorated. Some of these topics the glossary we'd intended to talk about in September and that got bumped. The thing that we just talked about is something that I've been thinking about and working on for the last the last week or so. So just nice to get those things out in the open and get really valuable feedback from a group of folks that I just really admire and whose opinions I value. And yeah, so thank you.
I'll go next. I feel educated. We had so much that we shared today with the reports and all the hard work that the city has done. So thank you, Dale, for putting all this together and educating me.
Yeah, and Shay.
Yes, I was going to say enlightening. I really found all this information to just be really good, and it didn't seem as heavy as some of the other topics that we often go over. The equity board gets a lot of tough things, and tonight it seems like we got something that made sense. We were able to make a decision right away. We got out some really good questions that got answers. It was just really enlightening and just very inspiring, because it's like, okay, now what do we do for the next meeting? Because what can we get accomplished there? So I really just felt a lot of joy in this meeting. So I don't know which word best describes it, but it was definitely very comforting to go through this meeting and feel like we got a lot of stuff accomplished.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
The word that I think comes to mind for me is just engaging. I feel tied to these agenda items because I think it really speaks to what we're doing here on this board. And it just makes sense for me tonight to kind of understand this in terms of, the effect of, laws that are passed, the fact that, there's a cost for tickets, where that money goes. So I feel like I'm kind of tied closer to the city and kind of engaged in terms of, this one thing and the impact. So.
And I'll end with proud of this city. I mean, this glossary of terms is fantastic. And that your values are set by your budget, right? You're showing exactly what you believe, and that the money is being put in a time of difficulty is amazing. So proud.
I'll say hopeful. I think in the last few days, there's my initial inclination might have been more to feel a little hopeless at what's going on in, at a national level, but knowing that we can keep doing this good, important work, in line with our values is, it gives me hope.
Great.
All right. And with that, I will adjourn this November meeting of the Equity Board at 7:51. And our next meeting is scheduled for December 4th.
Yes.
So thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Awesome.